So hello, we're here at Rezidența Scena9, where an exhibition organized by, Rezidența Scena9 is happening right now, having as guests Ukrainian artists, the ones who fled Ukraine and came to Romania, or some of them are still in Ukraine facing the horrible things that are happening right now. We're here with Roman Bondarchuk and Dar'ya Averchenko. I hope I pronounced your names right. To begin with the beginning, what was happening to you, filmmakers, but also part of the organizing team of the ТУТ.ЗАРАЗ, a documentary film festival happening in Kiev. What was happening to you one day before the Russian invasion?
We had just a normal working day preparing the festival, which was planned to be in the last week of March, and we heard about these crazy plans of Putin to start this war, but still it was difficult to imagine that it will happen for real. So late evening we conducted a meeting with the team of how to relocate our office in case of the war, and which measures we can take to save our data, to make some backups. And we decided to do these measures like next day, but next morning we woke up from explosions and realized that it's probably too late to relocate something. Like officially everyone has to take decisions, and some of people decided to stay in Kiev, and we also wanted to stay there, but because of kids, like after the day under these alarms and explosions, we realized that it will be better for kids to move somewhere.
So it was like really fast decision, and because we have beautiful friend from Romania, Ileana Stănculescu. She's a filmmaker and also a manager. She organized a film festival in Tbilisi, documentary film festival. So she just wrote to us, so guys, if you are like in the mood, I'll be your guide, because we have safe place in Sinaia. And also I have an apartment in Bucharest, and please just move out. You know, it was such a strange feeling that you absolutely can't move. You can't breathe. You can't understand what you should do, because everything is happening so fast, and you're listening to news and you don't know what is better and what is safer, to stay at home or to go somewhere, because the roads would be even more dangerous than your flat. But we decided to go because of children. Another decision we should take to go to underground station, to the metro, and live our life underground. And with the 3 small kids, it's just a crazy idea.
You're saying a lot, and maybe it's not very clear that all this was happening in 24 hours, right? You left in the first day of the war.
We started in the late night on 24th. Yeah, and then it was already like long queues to the gas stations. They could sell you only 20 liters of gasoline per car. It was already difficult to buy some food in the shops, and we had enormous traffic jams. I don't really remember, but the main road to the west in the direction of Zhytomyr was like totally blocked. Probably they already destroyed the bridge there. So we had to choose some side roads, and the whole experience, it took 5 days to move from Kiev to western border. It's like you're driving in a constant traffic jam with some stops for night.
Of course, a lot has been said about the big surprise of the Russian invasion. A lot of people are saying that there's not that much of a surprise because Ukrainian people have been anxious and ever since 2013 that there has been some anxiety in the air for Ukrainian people. And I was wondering just how much for you as filmmakers who did much material about Euromaidan, but also if afterwards, how much was it a surprise for you?
I still can't believe that it's happening, and people have to deal with that, that I have to call my parents every day and ask them if there is still food or medicine, and if there is still possibility to move from one place to another, because the Kherson is blocked and it's full of Russian soldiers.
And we are the part of Europe, and we thought that we are the part of civilized world. And we thought that all these negotiations, they still work. I mean, these negotiations, when we decided to give up our nuclear weapon.
They have had pro-Russian representatives in our parliament. They had quite a big opposition bloc there. The Russian business in Ukraine had like a lot of things, like banks, like enterprises, factories, so they could buy everything they wanted there, but they decided just to come and kill us, you know. The Russian propaganda, they created this demand from Russian society. It's something like more than 80% support that, and they believe in some Nazis. It's not only Putin's will, it's a demand from the whole country. They need this victory, they need this feeling of being on the top of everyone.
Yeah, but now the whole world knows that real Nazis are Russians.
You said at some point that images from the war as we see them from afar are much smaller than life, let's say. They're much smaller than these events represent in real life, right? I was just curious about this kind of position of yours watching, or you tell us if you're watching them, watching images with, well, horrific events happening from afar. Is it some kind of drive to see more? Did you get very sensitive to it and not want to watch it anymore? I'm speaking of images that are happening in Ukraine right now, the bombings, the killings, etc. What's your relation to this kind of representations?
I still take it really close to my heart. I'm sick, really, of what I like watching. For me, it's obvious that they just don't want to take this reality and don't want to really realize and help us. They think that their safe world is forever, but it's a mistake. And they will, sooner or later, but they will meet another reality.
Well, you just can't stop from watching it, and I have like something like 10 Telegram channels like with this information, and you cannot stop yourself from watching that. And of course, it's changed you, and it's like quite a painful experience, but you have to know what is happening, and you are not scared with dead bodies in the frame or some terrible images. You just collecting them. We as DocuDays, we are also started an initiative to collect such an evidences. We are launching a platform now where people can send their videos, and our team will tag the videos with keywords. So everyone can look for some place or event and investigate or use them for some war crime court, or use them for some documentaries or whatever. So we are on the stage of finalizing this programming thing, because it's quite a complicated system. And I think it's what we can do as film people just to organize all this nightmare in some order.
Would you say that deciding not to watch the violent images that are coming from Ukraine is something that has to do with privilege? That is something that not many Ukrainian people could do, but much of us who are safe, let's say, can do?
If I understood your question right, I mean, when the war started, it was so many images and clips spreaded like worldwide with a real war, with some burned bodies and things like that. But on the day 3, probably, the owners of foreign Telegram channels and social media owners, they decided to block the images because the audience which are not involved in the war, they are not like ready to see them. It's a big difference, and the problem was also with some editorial limitations of big media like Washington Post or some BBC. They have to blur these disturbing images. We discovered that realities are different, and level of sensitivity is also different from Ukraine to the places which are still safe. So it's probably a matter of bigger discussion. How shall we protect the rest of the world? But my opinion is that we don't need to protect other people, because if we can stop this aggression in Ukraine altogether, then the rest of the world will be safe. And if not, this nightmare will face them as well. So I think it's important to see how the real war looks like.
And have you rewatched the material you shot during Euromaidan? How did this material grow old right now? What's its heaviness, let's say?
Sometimes I think that the processes which are happening now in Ukraine since war started reminds me these Euromaidan events, but in a bigger scale. Like now it's affected the whole Ukraine, but the processes are quite similar, because it's enormous activization of civil society, all those volunteers movements, they collecting like millions of dollars for Ukrainian army to buy body armor, to buy drones, to buy these night vision devices. Another thing which is similar to what we saw on Maidan is that we don't have this horizontal hierarchy. So everything works we don't have this vertical, we have this horizontal relations between people, and on the level of small communities like villages or towns, when Russians invaded, they kidnapped the mayors of these communities, like appointed their own mayors. It doesn't work like that. People, they behave and act independently, and they have these horizontal connections, and they don't need someone to rule them, you know. And it's something which is very impressive, and something which help us to win now. Because for Russians it's unbelievable. They can only obey to some vertical orders and cannot organize themselves in other way. Yeah, Maidan affected only most active people who dared to go there and who were ready to fight for this freedom against our dictator. And you could spend the night on Maidan and then stuck in the traffic jam on the way back home, because the rest of Kiev was driving to their work without even noticing this Maidan. But now it's you cannot avoid that. It's affected everybody. And, all the Ukrainians are united and involved in this cooperation between each other. I believe that even our Human Rights Film Festival is also part of this growth of civil society, because we were like promoting that for how many years?
15 now.
15. We have hundreds of film club all over Ukraine, and
Traveling film festival.
traveling film festival which travels all across Ukraine. So probably we also invested into this.
Yeah, I think it was really happy time during Maidan. I mean, despite all these tragic moments, 100 people were shot during this winter time. But this feeling that you are like one nation and everybody's got together to defend their rights and defend the existence of Ukrainians. It was really a lot of happiness in this and a lot of energy, like good, constructive energy.
And most of volunteers organization, most of investigative journalism organizations, they all appeared during Maidan. So now they just have a bigger mission and more people involved. So it was probably one of the most important experience for our country. And of course we met like incredible people there, because it was like concentration of them there. Maybe you heard this expression that it's only like 2 or 3% of active people in every society, and all of them were there. So it was just a filter where you can go, and every person is something outstanding.
And speaking of your activities at Tokyo Days, you've been involved in the last few weeks in distributing and showing Ukrainian cinema to Romanian people. You yourself, but also probably your colleagues are involved in other missions of showing Ukrainian cinema elsewhere. Could you talk a bit about that? Films had wide circulation these days. Do you think, and what I really want to ask is, what do you think your films, Euromaidan, Ukrainian Share, Volcano, have to teach Western, non-Ukrainian audiences in these times?
The films are always about experience, and I think that they still can give this experience and emotions to the viewers, and to let them be with us and with our people, and to go through all the events and situations. The Euromaidan also has its educational purpose, because the events are placed in chronological level, and you can have this understanding of what was happening there. There are many requests from different countries now to screen the films, and sometimes people just like sending money, all the incomes they send to some Ukrainian initiatives. In the early days of this war, they preferred to send to some international organizations like Red Cross or some, let's say, famous, and it was also quite surprising for us, because they are already funded by their governments, by international bodies, and it was not so easy to explain that there are Ukrainians who need this money and you can trust them. Now it's better. Sometimes they just put boxes in the screening room and encourage people to put some money, and then they also send them to Ukraine. That's. We also work with festivals which are offering us to host some parts of our program, because Tokyo Days UA 2022 was fully prepared, and the idea to host some competitions Yeah, we already had screenings in Krakow, and we got an invitation from Sheffield Dog Fest and some other festivals. We're also in negotiations with the Bucharest One World Festival. So it goes, and we feel that it's important.
Did you ask about what like we wanted to teach with our films?
Or maybe not teach, it sounds pedantic, but what can it show for a better understanding of what's happening these days? Because besides their films being collective experience and telling stories, etc., they have a lot to do with Ukrainian society after Euromaidan and after the annexation of Crimea, etc., etc., and with crisis of authority, I'd say in general, especially male authority. That's why I'm asking, because it's a bit more. I mean, there are many great Ukrainian films circulating, but yours and some others directly have to do with this kind of socio-political context.
Yeah, sure, but yeah. What we wanted to tell, we wanted to tell our stories, because we both were products of our country, of Ukrainian South, and for us it was important to give the voice of the place we were born. And of course it couldn't be without new situation, new political situation. So and what we wanted to tell, that Ukraine is an incredible country and still not discovered enough, even for Ukrainians, even for Europeans, still exotic. It's very important to film in Ukraine, to film about Ukraine, to take any possibility to do it, because it's hard. It was hard, and now it will be harder. But it's what we can give to give to the world. Actually, you know, our stories from Ukraine now. Actually, it was like the main idea. Yeah.
No, it's better to ask the viewers what they can learn from our films. I think it's different from country to country, because when we had premiere of Volcano in Karlovy Vary, the response of audience was like great. They understood every single moment. But next day we had a premiere in Germany, in Munich, and people were absolutely silent, just watched the film with no emotion at all, and questions were quite practical.
What kind of lens did you?
Yeah, and some weeks after that, I had a screening in Canada, in Vancouver, and again it was completely another context and another question. So the closer you are to this reality, the more you can get from there, and vice versa.
A film like the ones you made before Euromaidan, so a film like Café Voyage, let's say.
How did you find it?
It's on that films, but
really?
also
okay.
Veni,
Cool. We forgot that we gave for the films the right for the screen.
Well, a film like Café Voyage, which shows this kind of wasteland of authority, it can contribute to a better understanding of maybe not nowadays Ukraine, but what authority has been in Ukraine for the last 30 years, something that got in crisis right after the fall of the USSR, and then something that was building itself but had, let's say, ups and downs that mainly had to do with Russian intervention in internal politics. Because not only Café Voyage, but many of your films, Volcano as well, but also Ukrainian Sheriffs, show this kind of people who are trying to build something new out of a wasteland and bring order, let's say.
On their own. Yeah, but you have to take into consideration the time span, because the Café Voyage was made like in time of presidency of Yanukovych, our dictator, the pro-Russian, Russian-baked president. He was completely just that all decisions were taken in Russia for him, you know. So it was just
Like a puppet.
like a puppet, yeah. And of course, it was no order, and it was like hopeless time for all of us. And the Café Voyage was made at that time, and the character of Café Voyage is the protagonist for Vova in Volcano. So it's also like part of our extensive research. It's too complicated. You have to. The Ukrainian sheriffs are also started in the times of Yanukovych, and back then we had a feeling that it's something which has no future. I mean, these sheriffs has no legal right to be the sheriffs, to do something as the sheriffs or policemen. And after that, we had Euromaidan, we had some democratic government, and then things changed. And after a couple of years, the state program was introduced mostly for veterans who are coming from the east, from this war. They had an opportunity to become sheriffs in their communities. Also, thanks to this film and to the case of village of Stara Zburivka, state program was created. So things are changing all the time. And of course, we as an artist, we are trying to point into the most painful thing. With the Volcano and with the Ukrainian sheriffs, you can feel this lack of authority and threat which is coming from Crimea. And so that happened now, that the Russian tanks, they invaded from Crimea to this southern part of Ukraine. So, sorry, probably I'm not answering your question.
No, you're answering better questions right now.
I mean that probably like there is some pieces of reality which is not reflected in our films, but it's better to point, if it's really patriotic approach, it's better to point to some weak moments and some moments which is bothering you the most, rather than to show some heroic things.
There is also very much about some other kind of lack of authority that hasn't, well, it has to do with the state, but let's say it has personal incarnations. Some characters and some people you're filming in your documentaries are something that the protagonist of Café Voyage says it's the kind of bad guys of the 90s. That now in the 2010s seem to be in crisis. Is it the thing you're interested in, the kind of landscape that the 90s represented for the Eastern Bloc, where authority wasn't well defined, so new hierarchies appeared, and there were these wise guys, these guys that were very quick at hand, and they have all this kind of clothes, appearance, cliches, the watch, the golden ring, etc., etc. They were, let's say, the ones who actually ruled the 90s, at least in Romania. But now in the 2010s, they seem to be in crisis. They got old. Their virility is not the same. Is this something that interests you? The kind of person that used to be very powerful, but now is in a kind of a desperate situation.
This particular character, Vova, it was his dream to be this opportunistic rich guy from 90s, but he never made it. Yeah, he never was like rich, and probably it was just his attempt to pretend that he was a rich guy. My feeling of that process is that after the fall of Soviet Empire, we had no reconsideration of our leaders, and our first president was like former communist.
Sure, I think everyone.
Yeah. And the rest guys in the regions, they also remained the same. They just changed the flag and the name. And then people from 90s appeared, and they took this power, and they, like many of them are still in business, so, or their kids. In 2014, we had this process of illustration, the process of distinguishing people who collaborated with this dictator, with Yanukovych, from those who were just coming to the power or to some positions. And it was, unfortunately, it was not finished properly, but still we had some success with that. There are tools and mechanisms to move forward, probably just a matter of time, because you see the president Poroshenko was re-elected with President Zelensky, and it looks like democratic processes. It's not like in Russia or other former
Or in Belarus.
or Belarus. So we had and still have this progress. I'm quite optimistic about it.
You talk about the great Ukrainian art that has to be discovered because it has been hidden, let's say, by the imperialist actions of the USSR and nowadays Russia. Can we talk a bit more about that? Why, or how, or what's your opinion on Ukrainian art being labeled as part either of Russia or of the Soviet Union? What contributed to this, and why is there no better understanding from outside of what culturally belongs to Ukrainian art and what culturally belongs to Russian art?
What Russia actually made to Belarus, made to Ukraine, and actually all former Soviet republics. She took all the heroes from literature, from cinema, all the branches, all the kinds of culture, and told everybody that all these beautiful guys, for example, philosopher Skovoroda, Russian, or writer Gogol, he's Russian, but we know our icons, and we know history, and for people who just want to dig dig out the history and history of culture, understands absolutely these propagandistic methods. But what they did a real crime, because what happened to Belarus, they actually don't have any walls. So they
took out all their artists, and they just announced that they are Russians. I mean, in terms of filmmaking, maybe you heard about 𝐓𝐡𝐞 studio. It was Ukrainian studio in 30s, if I'm not mistaken, and it was incredibly successful. They had so good sales internationally. They could buy film. They could produce like 100 films per year. And it was like one of the most productive periods in Ukrainian history ever, and they had collaboration with Ukrainian writers, theater directors. So it was incredible thing. And
also, while being in Ukraine before the Russian invasion, you were working, it was a work in progress with your newest film, Editorial Office, and maybe you can We can say a few words about what's happening in this film.
We almost completed it, so we made whole shooting except the epilogue, which we plan to shoot this spring. Percent of editing is done, but the editing director, he is now drafted to this war, and he is there, so we cannot continue. And we also have parts for CGI for some big scenes with fires in the forest with some animals running. It has to be done by our German partners, and they are producing them now. So we are in transition with this film. We brought the material with us, so we saved it from these war places and trying to develop it, to invent a new epilogue which is relevant to what is going on now.
What's the synopsis of the film?
The story is about a researcher from the Museum of Nature, from Provincial Museum of Nature. He, together with his colleague, they are looking for a gopher in a sense, and they witnesses the forest fire, and the arsonists who are setting this forest in fire, and they taking pictures of them. And after that, the colleague mysteriously disappears, and the character Yura, the guy you can see here, he is trying to deliver the pictures to editorial office of local newspaper in order to help his friend to get out of trouble. But instead, he is invited to be a part of the editorial office and to work there. And with every new task, he is diving deeper and deeper into this post-truth reality and fake news and this kitchen of newspaper they normally use for their work. So it's about like reality on the surface and reality on the deeper level, and about a young man who is trying to understand if he can go against the rules and if he can change something in this situation. And of course, it's an atmosphere of a place which is quite near to Crimea, to the war. But media and powerful people, they don't pay any attention to that. They believe that people are tired of war and they don't want to know anything about that. So it's also one of our topics that the war is near.
This kind of concept of fake news and post-truth concern you as filmmakers?
Sure, it's what impressed me from 2013, when someone can write that what to remember, the crucified boy on the tree by Ukrainian Nazis. With no evidences, with no pictures, but it becomes like a big news to the whole country. Or many other examples when you don't need any evidences, you can just produce post-truths and people will believe in that. So it's quite an interesting phenomenon.
People without critical thinking will believe it, but like people with critical thinking.
80% of Russians still do believe, and yeah, it's a part of war, and it's a war for our minds, and that's why it's important to investigate and to see how it all created. With this film, it was also interesting to make it in a light manner, to make it accessible to broader audience.
Would you say that Ukrainian sheriffs and Volcano aren't that available to Western audiences?
As every documentary, it's less accessible probably than fiction. They always have less audience than fiction. We have to finish this film first and then see if there will be more audiences or less.
It's not about how much public sees it, but there are certainly very different approaches from, let's say, Euromaidan, which is very easy to follow and didactic. While in Ukrainian series and Volcano, things are not, the evidence is not addressed from the very beginning. There is this kind of absurd and sometimes surreal atmosphere that has not to do with imagination, but with a kind of like post-war reality. But it's not being said. It's not from the very beginning. It's not very clear that we're talking about something that comes from Russian aggression. It's this kind of thing that you discover along the way. Are you planning something else for Editorial Office? Do you want a more didactic approach?
No way, no didactics. I believe that you can make some effect and deliver some understanding only by giving viewer to make his own conclusions and make his own impression. So you cannot like just pronounce your statement and believe that someone will believe to that. So it's of course it's also made from some observations. We did research before we made the script. We talked to all the journalists and to all the political advisors from that region. We collected their stories and we placed it in the way we normally work with documentaries, when you have like direct episodes of some events, and then we discovered some connections and some plot development. So it all grows from a documentary experience. But
we visited also such a celebration. Like, but we made it much more effective. But
they also did celebration and this eco settlement. But saying accessible, I mean the lightness, humor, describing some terrible events without like much drama in them, just
something light.
Yeah, with some hope and probably approach of young person, because young people can take things less seriously probably. And in terms of rhythm and concentration of events, this film is going to be faster.
To be a bit more clear about why I'm saying that Volcano, for example, it doesn't seem the most accessible to foreign audiences, it's just I was watching it yesterday once again, and I was watching that moment in which the grandma is looking at television, and there's a televised speech of Vladimir Putin talking about the historical integrity of the region and why it should go back to Russia, because historically speaking, blah 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 blah. I was thinking that it's very strange, because watching it now, everybody would understand what it is about. Watching it in 2014, probably everybody would understand, but in this kind of time lapse between 2014 and 2018, it seems very vague. Because if you don't remember Euromaidan very well, and it's also not happening what's happening right now, it's this kind of leader that's talking about something that has a lot to do with Ukraine and Russia, but otherwise it's very vague for someone who's not directly concerned. That's what I'm saying, is that Volcano from time to time shows its belonging to wider social political context and its explanation in this, but otherwise it's a story that has something mysterious to it.
But the episodes with the TV and Putin and all the rest of episodes are at the same level of absurdity, and that's why they fit into one picture. And of course, there are some things we also never expected, that Putin's statement about the common history, which is like pure bullshit, will lead to the real war, that he is crazy enough to take it so seriously and to consider himself as a new leader of a part of the world. We are not aiming at covering as much people as possible. It's not about our attempts to access more and more viewers and sell more and more tickets. It's about investigation which form can fit to that story. And this story demands some dynamics, because it's like many small stories in one big story, and you have to be fast enough to follow them, and it's just a practical reason. It's not because we decided to make profitable films. The thing is to do what you like.
It's great that you saved the film, that you have it with you. And you told me a few days ago that you have some friends or colleagues who are filmmakers and who didn't have the chance to save their films, the films that are work in progress right now. And also you told me some very emotional, let's say, stories about artists in general who are now involved in the war itself. Maybe you can tell it once again, because I think they're very precious.
Answering to your previous question, to the mood and to some light manner, I also wanted to say that this exhibition feels like light manner, and it's also important. You are talking to the audience on important topics, but still it's not dark at all. That's what I mean when I'm saying that this film will be in light manner as well. So we have to keep this tone in order to achieve something, And most of my friends, composers and filmmakers, they are not making art anymore. Most of them just trying to do something physically to survive this stress and to help people. Anton, a composer with whom I work, he is just driving and bringing people from dangerous places to safer ones. Other friend of mine, he's just filming newsreels and giving them to some TV stations without any proposal to make some bigger documentaries, because he says that it's so difficult to do some creative judgments. He can just fix what he sees and send it somewhere. So it's sort of a common thing for all of us. For me, it's very difficult to listen to music now, because music is something on completely different level that I have no access there now. Maybe because of the news and all these terrible images as well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.